the Alpha King, found a Luna and 2 cubs living inside his fortress. And what happened next changed the fate of the pack. The winter wind knifed through the stone corridors of Red Rock Fortress, whistling along arrow slits and rattling old shutters as if trying to claw its way inside. Torches spat and hissed in their brackets, their orange light licking the rough-hewn walls and casting long, wavering shadows across the flagstones. The fortress sat on a scrub-covered ridge above a frozen river in what men, centuries later, would call northern Colorado. Then, it was just cold, wild land, with endless pine and stone and sky. Inside, warmth and life clung stubbornly to the great hall. Smoke from the central hearth curled upward to blackened beams overhead, and rough wooden tables bore the scars of 100 feasts and 1,000 arguments. Men in leather and wool lounged on benches, tankards in hand, the tang of ale and sweat, steel and wet fur mingling in the air. Above them, the carved sigil of their pack, a crimson wolf's head over a jagged peak, watched with empty eyes. On the high seat, set upon a low stone dais, sat Rowan, Alpha King of Red Rock. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, calloused hands clasped so tightly his knuckles paled. His dark hair, too long since last shorn, fell over a face marked by a thin white scar that climbed from his jaw to his left cheekbone. That scar, like most he bore, came from the wars that had given him his crown. Wars that had cost him brothers, friends, and very nearly his life. Wars that left him wary of strangers and suspicious of gifts. He listened as his beta, Kale, reported in a low, steady voice about complaints from the southern pastures. Cattle gone missing, fences broken, human hunters seen near the river. Rowan's gaze flicked to the map spread on the table before him, ink and charcoal lines marking patrol routes, human settlements, and rival pack territories. The borders were thinner than he liked this season, stretched by illness and a harsh autumn that had taken 3 of his older wolves before their time. Before Kale could finish, the hall doors slammed open so hard the iron hinges screamed. Cold air crashed into the warmth, making torches flutter wildly. Heads turned, conversations died. A young sentry, Thomas, stumbled inside, cheeks flushed from the cold, hazel eyes wide with something between alarm and confusion. "Your Grace," he blurted, not even bowing. There's someone living in the old West Keep." Rowan rose to his feet so fast his chair scraped harshly against stone. The hall seemed to lean forward with him. Even the crackle of the fire quieted. Around the tables, men set down their tankards, hands drifting instinctively toward belt knives and the axes propped against benches. "No one lives in the West Keep," Rowan said. His voice was not loud, but it carried a deep, controlled rumble that brooked no contradiction. "It has been sealed for 2 winters." Thomas swallowed hard and shook his head, droplets of melted snow scattering from his hair. "They do, my king. I saw them. A woman, and 2 little ones." A ripple of unease passed through the gathered wolves. Rowan felt it like a shift in the air, the way a pack feels when something has gone wrong in the den. His wolf bristled beneath his skin, not in rage but in sharp, focused alertness. Rowan's jaw clenched. The West Keep was supposed to be sealed, crumbling, half abandoned, used for storage and little else. It sat within the inner walls, part of the original fortress built by men long dead and forgotten. If someone had slipped in and taken shelter there, they'd done it right under his nose. That alone was enough to make his blood simmer. "Armed?" Kale asked sharply, rising from his seat beside Rowan. His pale gray eyes had gone hard, his broad frame tensing like a drawn bow. Thomas shook his head again, chest heaving as he caught his breath. I didn't see weapons, not real ones. The woman had a knife, cooking. The little ones were playing with old bones. Animal bones, I think. They looked thin, hungry. A murmur rippled through the hall. Some scoffed, others frowned. Strangers inside the fortress with no one noticing. To wolves raised on vigilance and territorial instinct, the idea was as offensive as it was disturbing. Red Rock's reputation had been built on control, on knowing every scent and shadow within its walls. Rowan held up a hand. Silence fell at once, absolute and immediate. "You are sure," he said, eyes locked on Thomas with an intensity that made the boy straighten despite his exhaustion. "You saw them. Not shadows, not tricks of the light or the wine talking." "I am sure, Your Grace." The boy's voice steadied, finding its footing under Rowan's gaze. "I tracked a faint smoke trail from the inner courtyard during my rounds. Followed it to the old section. The old kitchen door was cracked open, just a hand's width. I looked in." He hesitated, then added in a quieter voice, "They smelled of wolf." The hall went utterly still. Not a cough, not a scrape of boot on stone. If you're listening to this and already drawn in by what's unfolding at Red Rock, take a quick moment to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single twist in this story, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. We'd love to know where our pack stretches to. Now, back to the fortress, and to the strangers no one should have been able to hide. Rowan's gaze sharpened like a blade catching firelight. "Wolf?" "Yes, my king. Faint, but they have our scent. Not Red Rock, but not human either. Definitely wolf." Cale's brows knit together, his expression darkening. "Rogues," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "Or refugees from one of the broken packs." "Or spies," someone else called from the back of the hall, voice rough with suspicion. "Blood River's been too quiet, Iron Fang too." Another voice joined in. "Could be a trap. Draw us in, make us lower our guard." Rowan's hand cut through the air, silencing the rising tide of speculation before it could build into panic. He had learned long ago that fear spreads faster in a pack than fire in dry grass. "How long?" he asked Thomas, voice still calm but edged now with steel. "How long have they been there?" Thomas faltered, uncertainty flickering across his young face. I don't know, Your Grace. Days, at least. Maybe a week, maybe more. There were blankets. A few. Worn but arranged. Bones piled neat in the corner, sorted by size. They've been there long enough to make a place. A den." Rowan's lips pressed into a hard line. That someone could have lived almost under his roof, inside his walls, without him knowing, gnawed at him more than the idea of intruders. Control of the fortress meant control of the pack. Lose the first, and the second would crumble like snow off a roof in the thaw. "We'll see for ourselves," he said, the words dropping into the hall like stones into still water. "Cale, with me. Thomas, you lead. Marcus, gather 3 scouts and watch the outer courtyard. No one shifts without my command." His gaze swept the hall, touching each face in turn. "The rest of you stay where you are. There will be no panic over a rumor, and no mob over fear." He descended from the dais, the ring of his boots on stone echoing in the vaulted hall. Cale fell in beside him, taller and broader, hair as fair as Rowan's was dark, eyes a pale gray that missed little. The beta carried his usual calm with him, but Rowan sensed the tension coiled in the man's shoulders, the way his hand drifted toward the long knife at his hip. "You think it's a mistake?" Rowan asked as they walked toward the inner door, Thomas hurrying ahead to open it, fumbling slightly with the iron latch. "I think Thomas does not lie," Cale said carefully, "but I also think it is not easy to slip into Red Rock. Not anymore. Not after we sealed the old drainage channels and reinforced the gates. Yet, someone did. So it seems." They passed through the narrow doorway and into one of the inner corridors that ringed the central courtyard. Here the air grew cooler, less touched by human warmth, and the smells changed. Less of bodies and food, more of stone, old straw, rust, and the faint iron tang of time passing unnoticed. Gray light filtered through small high windows, painting the passageway in muted tones of pewter and shadow. Red Rock Fortress was a strange, sprawling beast of a place, built and rebuilt over generations. Men had raised the first keep on this rocky prominence long ago, drawn by the vantage over the valley and the sheltering curve of the ridge behind. As Rowan's kind, the wolves, rose in power and influence, they had taken the fortress, expanded it, reinforced it with their own needs in mind. Human masons and wolf labor had raised new walls, dug deeper cellars, added towers and a second curtain wall to withstand siege. But the oldest part, the West Keep, remained much as it had always been. Solid, square, weather-beaten, and partly forgotten in the press of more urgent concerns. They stepped into the inner courtyard, boots crunching on a thin crust of snow that had drifted across the cobbles like ash. The sky overhead was a low, unbroken lid of pewter, heavy with the threat of more snow. The wind found every gap between stone and leather, sliding icy fingers down necklines and up sleeves, making even the wolves shiver. Thomas pointed toward a darker mass of stone on the western side, buttressed by low buildings that had once been kitchens and storerooms in the fortress's early days. "There," he said, voice low as if afraid of being overheard. "By the old kitchens. You can't see the smoke from here unless you look from the wall walk at just the right angle. The wind carries it away before it rises above the roofline." "Show me," Rowan cut in, his patience for explanation worn thin by the cold and the gnawing sense of something slipping through his fingers. They crossed the courtyard in silence. Rowan's eyes roved over familiar sights. The frozen trough near the stables where the horses stamped and blew in their stalls, the barrels stacked under a lean-to and rimed with frost, the training yard ringed with half-buried practice dummies that looked like hunched figures in the failing light. He had grown up in these spaces, learning where the stone cracked in the thaw, where ice formed first, where the wind howled loudest on stormy nights. This was his den, his territory. No corner should be a mystery to him. And yet, they reached the shadow of the West Keep. Up close, the age of the stone showed more clearly. The blocks here were larger, rougher, the mortar thick and crumbly with centuries of freeze and thaw. Moss grew in the damp seams, though winter had killed it back to dark stains and brittle remnants. The old kitchen door Thomas had mentioned sagged slightly on its hinges, its warped wood dark with time and weather, the iron banding pitted with rust. Thomas hesitated, hand hovering near the latch. "It was cracked before," he said quietly. "Just a finger width, enough to see firelight inside. I closed it when I left. My king. Didn't want to alarm them before you decided what to do." Rowan nodded once, approving. "Good thinking." He stepped forward himself, fingers curling around the cold iron ring. For a heartbeat, he simply listened. From within, he caught a faint murmur of movement, a soft, irregular scuff of something shifting on stone. A child's foot, perhaps, or the drag of cloth. Underneath, his wolf bristled, not in simple anger, but in focused alertness that made every sense sharpen. Strange wolves. Inside the walls. In his territory. In his den. He pulled the door open. Warmth and the smell of wood smoke spilled out immediately, along with a thread of scent that made his wolf go utterly still, ears pricking forward in his mind. Wolf. Female. Tired. Edged with fear but not panic. And beneath it, woven through like threads in wool, two smaller, sharper notes, young, restless, tinged with hunger, and the faint sourness of illness. The room beyond was dim, lit by a small fire built in a repurposed hearth that had probably not seen flame in a decade. The old kitchen had once served the entire keep. Now its blackened ceiling and soot-crusted stones told of 100 years of disuse and neglect. Someone had cleared a corner of fallen debris, sweeping aside broken crockery, rotted timbers, and old ashes. They had laid out 2 thin pallets made from old sacks and whatever cloth they could scavenge, rags mostly, stitched together with careful, even stitches. A 3rd pallet lay nearer the fire, with a surprisingly neat stack of folded blankets. No, not blankets. Old cloaks, moth-eaten and patched, stitched together into something resembling warmth. And in the middle of this makeshift camp, framed by the orange glow of the fire and the gray light filtering through a crack in the shuttered window, a woman turned toward him, eyes wide, body twisting to put herself between Rowan and the 2 small shapes behind her. She held a knife. Not much of one. An old kitchen blade, the edge likely dulled with age and misuse, the handle wrapped in fraying cord. But she held it with the grip of someone who had used a weapon before and knew where to aim. Her hair, a dark brown streaked with mud and ash, had been twisted back into a knot that had long since begun to come loose. Strands fell around a face that might have been striking, if not for the exhaustion carved into it like words in stone. Her cheeks were hollowed by hunger, her skin pale beneath the grime, her lips chapped and split at the corners. A faint scar bisected her right eyebrow, old and white. Her eyes, though, those were clear. Pale green, like moss under ice or new leaves in early spring. And they locked on Rowan with a mixture of defiance and calculation that pulled him up short, making him reassess the woman standing before him. "Don't come any closer," she said, voice low but steady. The knife did not tremble. Her stance, though weakened by hunger, was balanced. She knew how to fight. Behind her, 2 small figures clung to the back of her coat, half hidden in the shadows and the folds of worn fabric. One peeked around her hip, a boy of perhaps 6 winters, with a mop of dark hair that fell into eyes trying to look brave and failing, wide with barely contained fear. His small hands gripped his mother's coat so tightly his knuckles had gone white. The other, smaller shape pressed against the woman's legs, was a girl, maybe 4, who buried her face in the worn wool of her mother's tunic, fingers knotted in the cloth. A thin, reedy cough escaped her, muffled. Rowan took in the scene in a swift, practiced sweep, the remnants of dried meat in a cracked bowl, carefully portioned, the neat arrangement of firewood, each piece chosen for maximum burn time, the pile of bones in the corner, sorted and stacked as if someone had been teaching the children patience and order even in desperation, the way the woman's shoulders squared as if to make herself a wall between her young and the world. Air moved in and out of his lungs in deep, even breaths, feeding his wolf the scents it craved, the information it needed. She smelled of travel, of cold roads and pine needles, of old blood, fear, and a stubbornness that refused to bow even when sense said it should. She smelled, undeniably and unmistakably, of wolf. "I am Rowan of Red Rock," he said, letting his gaze meet hers without challenge, without the dominance he might have shown a rogue male. "This is my fortress. You are inside my walls, and you have been for some time." "You took your time noticing," she replied before she could stop herself, then bit the inside of her cheek as if cursing her own tongue for running ahead of her sense. Cale stepped in behind Rowan, placing his bulk just off Rowan's right shoulder, a silent show of support and quiet threat. His hand rested on his knife hilt now, not drawing, but ready. Thomas hovered in the doorway, trying to both see everything and make himself invisible, his breath misting in the cold air. Rowan's lips quirked, but the expression did not reach his eyes. "Few speak to me that way," he said mildly, "especially with their young behind them and a dull knife in their hand." She swallowed, throat working, then straightened a fraction more, shoulders angling to obscure the children further. "Maybe they should," she said, lifting her chin. "A king who lets strangers live in his walls for weeks without noticing. Perhaps he needs someone to speak plainly." Cale's nostrils flared, a warning in his gray gaze, but Rowan lifted a hand slightly, staying any reaction. He was more curious than offended. "Your name," he said. She hesitated, weighing the cost of truth against the cost of lies. He could almost see the decision in the set of her jaw, the way her fingers adjusted slightly on the knife hilt. "Lena," she said finally. "Of, nowhere that matters to you." "Everything inside my territory matters to me," Rowan replied evenly, "as does everything inside my walls." His gaze flicked briefly to the children, taking in the boy's tense, protective stance, the girls trembling. "Whose are they?" Lena's grip on the knife tightened, her knuckles going pale. "Mine." Rowan inclined his head, conceding the point without argument. "They have names?" "That's none of your—" "Everything inside my walls," Rowan repeated softly, but the undercurrent of command in it deepened, an invisible pressure in the small room that made even the firelight seem to dim. Even the smoke seemed to pause in its drift upward. "Matters to me." Lena's jaw worked. The boy, still half hidden, clutched at her coat with both hands now. The girl whimpered quietly, a sound more confused than afraid, and coughed again. A dry, rattling sound that spoke of cold nights and insufficient food. The woman exhaled slowly through her nose. "This is Eli," she said, rubbing her thumb briefly over the boy's knuckles in a small, steadying gesture that spoke of long practice. "And Mira." Rowan nodded, filing the names away. "How did you get inside the fortress, Lena of Nowhere?" Her gaze flicked toward the far wall before snapping back, too quick, too telling. He noted the movement and followed it. There, half concealed by a falling tapestry of old, rotting sacks and crumbling plaster, was a narrow ventilation shaft, just wide enough for a child or a very slender adult to wriggle through. It would lead, he guessed, to one of the disused drainage channels that ran beneath the inner yard, designed centuries ago to carry rainwater and waste away from the keep. He had followed many such hidden paths as a youth, when the fortress was more playground than responsibility, before the crown had settled on his shoulders and taught him the weight of stone and duty. "You know how," she said, following his gaze. "Your walls were built by men who did not think like wolves. Stone is full of holes, if you know where to look." "Most of which we have sealed," Cale said, his voice hard. "Or we thought we had." She shrugged, a small one-shouldered movement. "You missed one. Or I found it first. Does it matter?" Rowan studied her, taking his time. She was thin, yes, but not frail. The way she held herself spoke of training, of discipline learned young and never forgotten. A pack wolf, then, not a rogue raised wild. "Why here?" he asked, softening his tone slightly. "You travel with young, you are thin, exhausted, and you thought hiding in a king's walls was safer than the forest outside. Who are you running from?" A flicker crossed her face. Pain, anger, something like grief, and beneath it all a rage so cold and deep it made his wolf pause. But when she spoke, her words were cool, almost detached. "I thought wolves took care of our own," she said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I heard stories of Red Rock, that your king was less cruel than some, that he didn't kill rogues on sight just for sport, that he gave second chances to those who deserve them." Rowan did not move, did not shift his stance, but something old and weary in him stirred at her words. Stories, always stories. Few of them were completely true, and fewer still completely false. His reputation had been built on pragmatism as much as mercy, on the understanding that strength did not always mean killing. "Did you?" he said. "And did the stories also say what happens to those who trespass inside the Alpha King's own keep without his leave? Who hide in his walls like thieves and take his shelter without asking?" Lena lifted her chin higher, and he saw the faint tremor in her jaw that she fought to control. I assumed it was death, she said. But that outside your walls is worse, so I chose what I could not control over what I could. Her eyes sparked, green fire catching the flames. Besides, if you meant to kill us, you would have done so already. Standing here and asking my name first, that tells me enough about you. Cale's mouth curved in a humorless ghost of a smile. She's bold, he murmured to Rowan. She's tired, Lena snapped, her attention flicking to the beta for just a moment before returning to Rowan. Boldness is just what's left when you've run out of fear to spend. The boy, Eli, pressed his face briefly into the back of her thigh, muffling another sound. Not a cough this time, but something closer to a sob, quickly stifled. The girl, Mira, shivered despite being closest to the fire, her small frame racked by another coughing fit. You've been rationing food, Rowan observed, his eyes tracking the careful portions, the way the meat had been cut into impossibly small pieces to stretch further. And wood. To make what you could gather last as long as possible. Lena's shoulders stiffened, pride warring with pragmatism in her expression. You can smell that too, can you? Or is that just you being cruel for the sport of it? It is me being observant, he said. There is a difference. For a moment no one spoke. The fire snapped, a coal collapsing inward and sending up a small shower of sparks. Outside, somewhere in the courtyard, a distant shout carried faintly on the wind. Marcus organizing the scouts. Likely. Then died away into the muffled quiet of falling snow. Rowan's wolf paced within him, its instincts snarling at the presence of strange wolves in the heart of his den, every territorial impulse screaming to drive them out or dominate them into submission. Yet it paused, confused and uncertain, at the sight of the two small bodies clinging to their mother, at the gaunt hollows in Lena's face, at the careful, desperate order of their small camp. Wolves did not abandon their young, not if they could help it, not if there was any other choice. You said you smelled wolf on them, Cale said quietly, eyes still on Rowan, waiting for direction. She doesn't carry our pack's mark, neither do the young. No, Rowan agreed, still watching Lena. They do not. He took a step into the room, slow and deliberate. Lena's knife rose a fraction, her arm tensing. Eli whimpered. Mira pressed her face harder into her mother's leg. I won't harm them, Rowan said, keeping his voice low and even. If I had meant to, we would not be talking. You would already be dead or bleeding. Kings kill after talking too, Lena said, but her hand dropped a hair's breadth, the point of the knife angling slightly away from his chest. Some do, Rowan acknowledged. I prefer to know what I'm killing before I do it. Or why. It saves regret later. How practical, she said, bitter humor threading through her exhaustion. Where is your pack? Rowan asked, changing tack. Or did you have none? A shadow crossed her green eyes, deep and dark as storm clouds gathering over the ridge before a blizzard. Her expression shuddered, closing like a door. They're gone, she said flatly. That's all you need to know. It is not, Rowan replied, taking another careful step. The children shifted, but Lena held her ground. You bring your scent and your young into my home. You know my name. You know my reputation, if not the full truth of it. And yet you will not tell me who hunts you, or why. That makes me suspicious, Lena of Nowhere. She raised her chin, defiance flaring again. You have enemies, she said, voice hardening. I saw their sign on the road south of here. Ironfang. Blood River. There are others, I'm sure. If I carry a story of one more grudge to your door, what difference does it make? You're a king. Everyone wants something from you or wants you dead. Cale's head snapped toward her, his entire body going tense. You saw Blood River sign? He asked sharply, urgency cutting through his usual calm. Where? Lena blinked, then cursed under her breath, low and vicious, recognizing the slip. Rowan caught every twitch of her jaw, every flicker in her gaze, the way her free hand clenched briefly before relaxing. "Where?" Rowan repeated, his voice dropping into a tone that brooked no deflection. She hesitated, clearly weighing how much truth would cost her. Then she exhaled, shoulders sagging slightly. 2 days' walk south, she said, near the river bend where the ice breaks early in spring. They'd marked trees, claw marks high up, old marks, at least a week, perhaps 2, maybe older. Rowan's mind shifted gears instantly, calculations spinning. Blood River, a pack with whom his people had clashed repeatedly over the past decade, creeping that close to his borders without formal challenge or declaration. His temper, usually slow to ignite and carefully controlled, flared hot in his chest. "You crossed their path," he said, not a question. "I did not stop to parley," Lena replied dryly, a ghost of dark humor in her tone. "And they chased you," Rowan pressed. She said nothing, which was answer enough. Her silence spoke volumes. "Why?" Cale demanded, stepping forward now, his patience clearly worn thin. "Blood River doesn't hunt lone she-wolves and cubs for sport. Not usually. Not unless there's a reason." Lena closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering herself, then opened them. The green had gone hard, like stone beneath ice. "Because," she said slowly, every word weighted, "I left them." Rowan went very, very still. Even his wolf paused mid-pace, ears forward. "You are Blood River?" he asked, voice quiet but sharp as a blade drawn in the dark. "Was," she shot back, the word cracking like a whip. "There, Luna. Once. A lifetime ago." Cale swore softly in their own tongue, a word that tasted of iron and old grudges and blood feuds that stretched back generations. "So," Rowan murmured, his mind racing through implications, through possibilities and dangers. "The Alpha's mate of my enemy walks into my fortress with his young at her heels, without his scent on them." His gaze sharpened like winter wind cutting through wool. "And I am to believe that is chance, coincidence?" Her lip curled, bitter and sharp. "Believe what you like, King of Red Rock. I tore his mark out myself, with a blade and my own hand. I will not wear it. Not on me, not on them, not ever again." Rowan's eyes drifted to her neck, to the pale skin where, on most mated wolves, a faint pattern of scar tissue marked the bond. The Alpha's bite, the claiming mark. On Lena, he saw another scar entirely. A rough, jagged line, not from teeth, but from steel. Deliberate. Self-inflicted, unless someone had held her down and cut her. He stepped closer, ignoring the knife now that he understood how weak her arm must be from hunger and cold and the sheer effort of keeping her children alive. "You removed his mark," he said quietly, almost gently. "With a blade." She swallowed hard, her throat working. "He did not own me," she said, each word deliberate and heavy. "I told him that, many times. He disagreed. He thought the mark meant possession, that I was his to command, to control, to use." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, then steadied. "So I left, with our young. He objected, violently." Images flickered behind her gaze, quick and brutal and unwanted. Rowan recognized that look intimately. Memory, rapid, brutal. The kind that came at night when sleep should have been safe. He did not push, not yet. He had seen enough war to know when someone was standing on the edge of breaking. "If he finds us," Lena continued, voice flattening into something cold and practical, "he will kill me. Slowly, probably, to make an example. He will take them. He will raise them to hate me, or forget me entirely." Eli will be trained to be just like him. Mira will be given to whatever alliance serves him best when she's old enough. Her hand tightened on Eli's shoulder, protective and fierce. I thought dying on the road was better than that, especially for them. Silence wrapped around the little group like another layer of cold, heavy and suffocating. Rowan lifted his face slightly, scenting the air again, as if the phantom of Blood River's Alpha might linger in the smoke and ash. Instead, he smelled only Lena, and the two young, and the stone and old fire of his own fortress. And underneath, faint but unmistakable, the scent of fear. Not panic, but the deep, bone-tired fear of someone who had been running for so long they'd almost forgotten what it felt like to stop. You brought his heirs into my home, he said carefully. Do you understand what that means? What leverage that gives me? What target it paints on your back if anyone discovers you're here? Her mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile if it had held any warmth. I brought my children where I thought they would be least likely to die screaming in the snow, she said. If that happens to be your home, take it up with the gods or fate or whatever power you think governs this wretched world. We have no gods, Cale said flatly, his tone hard. Only teeth, and law, and survival. Lena looked at him, really looked at him for the first time, taking in his size, his stance, the controlled violence that simmered beneath his calm exterior. Then what does your law say? She asked, turning her attention back to Rowan. About a woman with no pack, with two young, who crawls into your walls and begs your mercy without words? Kill her? Throw her out into the snow to freeze or be torn apart by whatever finds her first? Hand her back to the male who marked her and claimed ownership? Rowan felt the eyes of Thomas and Cale on him, the weight of the crown that was not metal, but flesh and blood, an expectation pressing on his shoulders like stone. He thought of his own mother, half remembered through the fog of childhood, who had carried him through a blizzard to these same walls when he'd been no older than Eli, fleeing a different kind of violence. He remembered the way the then Alpha had looked at them both, measuring his mother's worth against the burden they represented, the mouths to feed, the threat of whoever might come looking. Red Rock's law was clear on trespass. Any rogue found inside the inner walls without leave could be put to death. It was a law born of brutal winters and scarce resources, of packs who could not risk caring for every stray who crossed their path. When survival itself was a knife's edge, they walked every season. But laws, he had learned through blood and loss and hard-won wisdom, were guides, not chains. They served the pack, not the other way around. You will not leave this room, Rowan said slowly, each word measured. Not yet. Lena's fingers tightened on the knife again, her body tensing. So that's it then? Prison? A cage? For now, he replied, holding her gaze. You will have food. Real food, not scraps. And water, clean water. And warmth for the young. Blankets that aren't moth-eaten. Medicine for the girl's cough if we have it. He paused, then continued. You will tell me everything about Blood River's movements, their numbers, their territories, their grievances. You will explain in detail and without omission why their Luna fled her pack and walked, or crawled, into mine. I did not walk, she said, her voice tight. I crawled, on my hands and knees through that damn drainage shaft with my children sobbing behind me. Then you will explain that too, he said, not unkindly. And if I believe you, if I judge that you did not come here as a dagger in another's hand, as a spy or a trap set by my enemies, we will speak again of what place you and your young might have at Red Rock. Cale shifted, discomfort clear in the set of his shoulders. Rowan, he began, an edge of concern and warning in his tone. Rowan cut him off with a look, sharp and final. Our enemies move near our borders, he said, not taking his eyes off Lena. Blood River, whom we have fought twice and barely held at bay. Their Luna stands in my kitchen with his heirs. This is not chance, Kale. But that does not mean she is their willing weapon. Lena's gaze burned, fierce despite her exhaustion. I am no one's weapon, she said, voice low and dangerous. Not anymore. Not anymore, Rowan agreed, inclining his head slightly. That much, I believe. Eli tugged at her coat with both hands now, pulling her down enough to whisper urgently in her ear, too quiet for Rowan to catch the words. Lena closed her eyes briefly, face softening in a way that made her look younger, more vulnerable. When she opened them again, Steele had returned. What if I refuse? She asked, straightening to her full height again. To tell you what you want? To play your games of strategy and information? Rowan's answer was quiet, but not unkind. There was no cruelty in it, only brutal honesty. Then you walk back into the snow with your young, he said, and I pretend I never saw you, that you were a shadow, a trick of firelight. Nothing more. Thomas made a soft, involuntary sound of protest from the doorway. Kale's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, trusting Rowan's judgment even when it troubled him. Lena stared at Rowan as if trying to see through flesh and bone to the man, or wolf beneath, searching for deception or hidden cruelty. You would do that? She asked, disbelief threading through her exhaustion. Truly? Send a mother and 2 sick children back into winter? Yes, he said simply, without hesitation or apology. Because I cannot harbor the Luna of my enemy blind. That is not how a king keeps his people safe, Lena. That is not how I protect the wolves who depend on me for their survival. But I will not kill children because of who their sire is. Nor will I take a mother from them because others believe I should. Those are my limits. Where you fall within them is your choice. The knife in her hand lowered, very slowly, until the point touched the stone floor. She crouched carefully, her movements deliberate and controlled despite her weakness, and set the blade on the stone beside the pallet. Eli watched her with huge eyes, biting his lips so hard Rowan thought it might bleed. Mira sniffled, then rubbed at her nose with the back of her hand, coughing again. I will not go back, Lena said, her voice steady despite everything. Not to him, not to Blood River, not ever. I would rather die in the snow than return. Then help me make sure he never walks into these walls behind you, Rowan replied. Help me understand what I'm facing, what we're all facing. She laughed once, a short, harsh bark without humor. So that's it then. Trade one king for another, one master for a different leash. No, Rowan said, and something in his tone made her pause. Trade no king for a pack that might be yours if you earn it, if you prove yourself. Lena blinked, genuine surprise flickering across her face. You would make a Blood River wolf Red Rock? She asked, incredulity sharp in her voice. His Luna? His heirs? I would make a wolf who stands between her children and a knife one of mine, Rowan said simply, meaning every word. Blood carries weight, Lena. Lineage matters, but choice does too. Maybe more. I am Alpha King because I chose to fight for this pack when I could have run, because I chose to stand when others fell. That matters more than whose blood runs in my veins. A long moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility and danger both. Outside, snow began to fall again in earnest, thick flakes feathering down into the courtyard, softening the harsh angles of stone and timber, muffling sound. In the old kitchen, the fire popped loudly, sending a shower of sparks up the ancient flue. At last, Lena nodded once, slow and deliberate. Very well, Rowan of Red Rock, she said, exhaustion bleeding into every syllable. Ask your questions. I'll answer what I can. But understand this clearly. If anything you plan, anything you decide, puts Eli or Mira at risk, if I even suspect it might, I walk. Law or no law, fortress or no fortress, king or no king. I don't care if it kills me. They come first. Rowan felt something inside him shift and settle, a quiet click, like a lock turning or a door opening that had been closed for too long. The path ahead was still shrouded, tangled with the branched possibilities of war and allegiance, of betrayal and trust, of old grudges and new choices. But one thing was suddenly, startlingly clear. The arrival of this woman and her 2 cubs inside his walls was not a simple matter of charity or trespass, not a footnote in the season's troubles. It was a turning point, a fulcrum on which the future might pivot. He inclined his head, not as king to supplicant, but as wolf to wolf, as one survivor to another. "Agreed," he said, his voice carrying the weight of oath. "On my word as Alpha King of Red Rock, your young will not suffer for my decisions. Not if I can prevent it." Lena exhaled slowly, some of the brittle, desperate tension bleeding from her shoulders. Her whole body seemed to sag slightly, as if she'd been holding herself upright through sheer will, and his words had finally given her permission to acknowledge her exhaustion. Behind her, Eli's stance softened a fraction, his grip on her coat loosening slightly. Mira edged her head out from behind Lena's leg, peeking curiously at Rowan with large, dark eyes that held more questions than fear now. Rowan met that small, searching gaze and felt the weight of futures, unknown, unwritten, dangerous, settle more firmly on him. Whatever came next, Blood River's rage and the vengeance of a spurned alpha, his own pack's doubts and suspicions, the strain of more mouths at the table when winter already bit hard. This moment would echo through it all. The Alpha King of Red Rock had found a Luna and 2 cubs living inside his fortress, hiding in the oldest stones of his home, surviving on scraps and stubbornness. And what happened next would change not only their fates, but the fate of every wolf who called Red Rock home, and perhaps the fate of the territory entire. But that story, that reckoning, was still unfolding, still being written in choices not yet made, and blood not yet spilled. Rowan turned to Kale. "Bring food," he said quietly. "Bread, meat, water, enough for all 3, and find blankets, real ones." He paused, then added, "And fetch old Marion. Tell her we need her herbs for a child's cough." Kale hesitated only a heartbeat before nodding. "As you command, my king." As the beta turned to go, Rowan looked back at Lena. "You will have what you need," he said. "For tonight, at least. Tomorrow, we talk. Truly talk." She nodded, too tired to argue, too grateful despite herself to refuse. Rowan stepped back toward the door, giving her space, giving the children room to breathe without the weight of his presence bearing down on them. But before he crossed the threshold, he paused and looked back one last time. Lena had sunk down beside the fire, Eli and Mira pressed against her sides, her arms wrapped around them both. In the firelight, they looked less like threats or problems, and more like what they truly were. A family, broken and desperate, clinging to each other in the dark. And for reasons he did not entirely understand yet, Rowan knew he would not let them fall, not without a fight. The door closed behind him with a soft thud, and Rowan stood for a moment in the corridor, letting the cold air wash over his face. His wolf paced restlessly beneath his skin, torn between territorial instinct and something else. Something that recognized the desperate courage it took for a mother to choose the unknown over the certainty of death. Kale waited a few paces away, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "You're taking a risk," he said quietly once they were out of earshot. "I know," Rowan replied, starting back toward the main keep. His boots echoed on stone, each step deliberate. Blood River will come looking for her, eventually. I know that too. And when they do, Kale continued, falling into step beside him, they won't send messengers. They'll send warriors, probably their best. An alpha doesn't let his Luna simply walk away, especially not with his heirs. Rowan stopped walking and turned to face his beta fully. The torchlight caught the planes of his face, throwing shadows across the scar on his cheek. "What would you have me do?" he asked, voice low but edged with steel. "Throw her to the wolves, literally, to avoid a conflict that may already be coming anyway?" Blood River marked trees 2 days south of here, Cale. They're already testing our borders. Cale's gray eyes studied him carefully. "No," he said finally. "I wouldn't have you throw her out. You know me better than that. But I would have you understand what you're inviting into Red Rock. This isn't just shelter for a rogue and her pups. This is declaring yourself her protector, her new alpha in effect. Only if she chooses to stay," Rowan said, "and only if I decide to let her. You've already decided," Cale observed with the bluntness of old friendship. "I can see it in your face." Rowan's jaw tightened. He wanted to deny it, to claim he was merely gathering information, being strategic. But Cale had known him since they were boys, training in that very courtyard, bleeding together, growing together. There was no point in lying. "She cut his mark out of her own flesh," Rowan said quietly. "She dragged her children through a drainage shaft in the dead of winter rather than stay with him. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of alpha leads Blood River." "It tells you what kind of mate he was," Cale corrected gently. "Not necessarily what kind of alpha. The two aren't always the same." Rowan shook his head. "A wolf who brutalizes his own mate will brutalize his pack. It's only a matter of time and opportunity. You know that as well as I do." Cale sighed, running a hand through his pale hair. "I do," he admitted. "Which is why I'm not arguing with your decision. I'm just making sure you've counted the cost before the bill comes due." "The cost is another enemy at our gates," Rowan said. "But Blood River was going to be a problem whether Lena was here or not. At least this way, we have someone who knows their numbers, their tactics, their weaknesses. If she tells the truth." "She will," Rowan said with certainty he couldn't quite explain. "Fear is a hard thing to fake, so is that kind of desperation. She's not Blood River's spy, Cale. She's their refugee." They resumed walking, passing through the inner courtyard where Marcus had positioned scouts along the walls. The men nodded respectfully as Rowan passed, but he could see the questions in their eyes. Word would spread quickly. It always did in a pack this size. By morning, everyone would know about the woman and children in the West Keep. "You'll need to address the pack," Cale said, reading his thoughts, "before the rumors get worse than the truth." "Tomorrow," Rowan agreed, "after I've spoken with her properly. I need to know what we're dealing with first." They entered the main keep through a side door, the warmth hitting them like a wall after the bitter cold outside. The great hall had quieted somewhat, though many wolves still lingered, waiting for news. Conversations died as Rowan appeared, all eyes turning to him. He raised a hand, forestalling questions. "We found them," he said simply. "A woman and 2 children, sheltering in the old West Keep. They are not a threat. They will be fed and cared for tonight, and tomorrow I will learn their full story." He let his gaze sweep the room, touching each face. "Until then, they are under my protection. Is that understood?" Murmurs of assent rippled through the hall, though he caught undercurrents of skepticism and concern. That was natural. His people trusted him, but trust didn't mean blind obedience. "Marcus," Rowan called out. The scout captain stepped forward, a grizzled wolf with more scars than teeth. "Double the wall watch tonight. I don't expect trouble, but I won't be caught sleeping if it comes." "Yes, Your Grace," Marcus rumbled, already turning to organize the shifts. Rowan looked to one of the younger women near the hearth. "Sarah, gather food for 3. Bread, meat, whatever we have that's easy on a sick child's stomach. And find old Marian. Tell her I need her healing knowledge." Sarah bobbed her head and hurried off toward the kitchens. "Thomas," Rowan continued, finding the young sentry who'd discovered Lena. "You did well tonight. That was good instinct, closing the door and coming straight to me rather than confronting her alone." The boy flushed with pride. "Thank you, Your Grace. Get some rest. You're off watch for the remainder of the night." As Thomas retreated, clearly pleased despite his exhaustion, Rowan felt the weight of leadership settle more heavily on his shoulders. Each decision rippled outward, touching lives he was responsible for protecting. And he'd just made a decision that could ripple very far indeed. Cale touched his elbow lightly. "I'll take the food and blankets to them," he offered. "You should eat something yourself, and sleep if you can." Rowan shook his head. "I'll take it. I need to see them settled myself." "Why?" Cale asked, curiosity replacing concern. "You've given orders. They'll be cared for. What does it matter if you personally—" "It matters," Rowan interrupted quietly. "She needs to see that my word means something. That when I promise protection, I follow through. Not just through orders, but through action." Understanding dawned in Cale's eyes. "You're building trust." "I'm trying to," Rowan corrected. "Whether it works is up to her." 20 minutes later, Rowan stood outside the old kitchen door again, his arms laden with supplies. Sarah had packed a basket with fresh bread, cold roasted venison, cheese, and a small jar of honey. Old Marion had provided a pouch of herbs with careful instructions. Steep them in hot water. Have the child drink it twice daily until the cough cleared. Blankets, thick and warm, were folded over his other arm. He knocked, a courtesy he suspected Lena would appreciate. "It's Rowan," he called out. "I have food, and medicine for Mira." A pause, then Lena's voice, wary but not hostile. "Come in." He pushed the door open with his shoulder and entered. The scene had barely changed. Lena still sat by the fire with her children, though they'd rearranged themselves slightly. Eli now sat cross-legged, watching the door with alert eyes. Mira had curled up with her head in her mother's lap, her small face flushed with fever. Lena's hand rested protectively on her daughter's shoulder, and her eyes tracked Rowan's every movement as he entered and set the basket down near the fire. "As promised," he said simply, unpacking the food. "There's more if you need it. Don't ration this. Eat what you need. All of you." Lena stared at the basket as if it might vanish if she looked away. Eli's stomach growled audibly, and the boy flushed with embarrassment. "Go ahead," Lena said softly to her son. "It's all right." Eli didn't need to be told twice. He reached for the bread with trembling hands, tearing off a piece and stuffing it into his mouth. His eyes closed in something close to bliss at the taste of fresh food. Rowan set the blankets down next. "These are clean and warm, better than what you've been using." He pulled out the herb pouch and held it up. "Old Marion is our healer. She says to steep these in hot water. I'll have someone bring a kettle shortly and give it to Mira twice a day. It should help with the cough." Lena's throat worked as she swallowed hard. "Thank you," she said, and the words sounded like they cost her something. Pride, perhaps, or the fear that accepting help meant accepting obligation. "You're welcome," Rowan replied. He crouched down to be closer to eye level, careful not to crowd them. "How long has she been coughing like that?" 3 days, Lena admitted, stroking Mira's hair. "Maybe 4. It started as a tickle, but it's gotten worse." "Marion's herbs will help," Rowan assured her. "She's kept half this pack alive through worse winters than this." Mira stirred slightly, her fever-bright eyes opening to focus on Rowan. She studied him with the solemn curiosity of the very young. "Are you really a king?" she asked, her voice hoarse and small. Rowan's expression softened. "I am." "Does that frighten you?" She considered this seriously. "Mama says kings can be good or bad. Which are you?" "Mira," Lena said sharply, but Rowan raised a hand. "It's all right," he said. Then to Mira, "I try to be good, but you'll have to decide that for yourself." Okay, Mira said simply, then closed her eyes again, apparently satisfied. Eli had moved on to the meat now, eating with the focused intensity of someone who'd been hungry for too long. Rowan made a mental note to ensure they had regular meals from now on. Watching children starve went against every instinct he possessed. "You'll need to leave this room eventually," Rowan said to Lena. "The West Keep is cold, and it's not safe for sick children. There are better quarters in the main keep." Lena's shoulders tensed. "Where everyone can watch us. Where we're surrounded." "Where you're warm and protected," Rowan corrected. "But I won't force you to move tonight. When you're ready." She searched his face, looking for deception or hidden agenda. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her somewhat, because she nodded slowly. "Tomorrow," she said. I'll consider it tomorrow." Fair enough. Rowan stood, his knees protesting slightly after crouching. "I'll have someone bring hot water for the herbs within the hour. If you need anything else, send word. The door isn't locked. You're not prisoners. But I'd ask that you stay in this wing for now, just until my pack gets used to the idea of you being here." "Because we're strangers," Lena said. "Because you're Blood River," Rowan replied honestly. "That name carries weight here. Bad weight. My wolves have lost friends and family to your former pack. They'll need time to separate you from those memories." Lena's expression flickered with something. Shame? Guilt? "I understand," she said quietly. Rowan moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing," he said. "The boy, Eli. How old is he?" 6, Lena answered, her hand moving protectively to her son's shoulder. 6 last autumn. Why?" "Because 6 is old enough to start training if you stay," Rowan said. "Old enough to learn what it means to be pack, not just a stray. Think about that." He left before she could respond, pulling the door closed behind him. In the corridor, he leaned against the stone wall for a moment, exhaling slowly. His wolf had calmed somewhat, no longer seeing them as pure threat, but it remained alert, waiting to see what this gamble would cost. Cale appeared from around the corner, as if he'd been waiting. "How are they?" "Hungry. Sick. Scared." Rowan pushed off from the wall. "But alive. That's something." "It's a start," Cale agreed. They walked together back toward the main keep. "The pack is curious. Some are worried. A few are angry." "I'll speak with anyone who has concerns," Rowan said. "Privately if needed. But my decision stands." "I know. I've already told them that." Cale's expression turned thoughtful. "There's something else you should know. While you were gone, a messenger arrived from the northern border. Connor's patrol spotted tracks, a large group, maybe a dozen wolves, moving east along the ridge." Rowan's attention sharpened instantly. Direction? Toward Blood River territory, or from it? Connor couldn't tell which. The snow covered the oldest signs. Rowan's jaw tightened. Blood River scouts, looking for her most likely. "Or testing our defenses," Cale said. "Could be both." "Double the northern patrols," Rowan ordered. "And send word to Connor. I want to know the instant anyone crosses into our territory. No engagement unless they attack first, but I want eyes on every approach." "Already done," Cale said. "Figured you'd want it." They reached the great hall again. The crowd had thinned as wolves dispersed to their quarters or their duties, but a core group remained. Rowan's closest advisors and most trusted warriors. They looked up as he entered, questions written plainly on their faces. Rowan took his seat on the high chair and gestured for them to gather closer. "I know you have questions," he said without preamble. "Ask them now. Honestly. I'd rather deal with concerns tonight than let them fester." An older wolf named Gerard spoke first. "The woman? She's Blood River's Luna? Truly?" She was, Rowan confirmed. She left. And from what I've seen, she had good reason. With his heirs? Another asked, a warrior named Finn. That's not just leaving. That's theft. Insult. Blood River's Alpha won't let that stand. No, Rowan agreed calmly. He won't. Which is why we need to be prepared. For what? Gerard pressed. War? Over one woman and 2 pups? War was coming anyway, Rowan said, his voice hardening. They've been marking our borders, testing our resolve. This just moves up the timeline. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But it also gives us an advantage. She knows them. Their numbers, their tactics, their weaknesses. That's worth more than you might think. If she tells the truth, someone muttered. I believe she will, Rowan said firmly. And until proven otherwise, she and her children are under my protection. That means Red Rock's protection. Anyone who has a problem with that can bring it to me directly. Silence fell, heavy with consideration. Finally, Gerard nodded slowly. If you trust her, we'll follow your lead, he said. But keep us informed. We need to know what we're facing. I will, Rowan promised. Tomorrow I'll speak with her properly, get the full story, then we'll plan accordingly. The group began to disperse, though Rowan caught murmured conversations continuing as they left. That was fine. He expected doubt. Leadership wasn't about eliminating questions, but about making decisions despite them. Cale remained behind, settling into the chair beside Rowan's. That went better than I expected, he said dryly. They trust me, Rowan said. For now. That trust is earned through action, though. I'll need to deliver on what I've promised. You will, Cale said with conviction. You always do. Rowan wasn't so sure. The path ahead had grown more complicated in the span of a single evening, a Luna and 2 cubs in his walls. Blood River circling like wolves around wounded prey. His own pack's uncertainty. And somewhere beneath it all, the nagging sense that this was the beginning of something much larger than he could yet see. But he'd faced worse odds before. He'd survived them through cunning, through strength, and through the loyalty of wolves like Cale, who stood beside him even when the way forward was unclear. He would survive this too. He had to. Because Lena wasn't the only one who'd made a choice tonight. Rowan had chosen to protect her, to offer sanctuary when the easier path would have been to turn away. And once a wolf of his word made such a promise, there was no taking it back. Not without losing something far more valuable than territory or pride. Not without losing himself. The next morning dawned gray and cold, with fresh snow blanketing the fortress in muffled silence. Rowan woke before dawn, as was his habit, and made his way to the battlements. From there, he could see the full extent of Red Rock's domain, the valley below, the frozen river like a silver scar through the landscape, the dark masses of pine forest spreading to the horizon. Somewhere out there, Blood River's Alpha was waking too, learning, perhaps, that his Luna had vanished with his heirs, making plans, gathering wolves, preparing for whatever came next. Rowan breathed in the cold air, letting it sharpen his focus. War was coming. He'd known it for months, felt it in the way rival packs moved and positioned themselves. Lena's arrival had simply lit the match to kindling that was already laid. But wars could be won or lost before the first blow was struck, depending on preparation and will. And Rowan had both in abundance. He descended from the walls and made his way to the West Keep. Morning light filtered weakly through high windows, painting everything in shades of gray and pale gold. When he reached the old kitchen door, he found it slightly ajar. He knocked anyway. Lena? It's Rowan. Come in, her voice called, stronger than last night. He entered to find the space transformed. The fire still burned, but someone, Lena, he assumed, had cleaned the area thoroughly. The pallets were neatly arranged, the blankets folded. Eli sat near the fire, working seriously on a piece of bread and cheese. Mira lay curled in one of the new blankets, her breathing easier than before, though still heavy with sleep and illness. Lena stood near the window, arms crossed, watching him with those calculating green eyes. She'd tied her hair back more securely, and despite her thinness, she stood with the posture of someone who'd been trained as a warrior. "Good morning," Rowan said. "How is Mira?" "Better," Lena admitted. "The herbs helped. She slept through most of the night without coughing." "Good." Rowan moved into the room but kept a respectful distance. "We need to talk, properly, this time." Lena glanced at Eli, then back to Rowan. "Not in front of him," she said quietly. "Some things children don't need to carry." Rowan understood. "There's a small room down the hall. Used to be a guard room. It's private. Kale can watch Eli and Mira while we speak." Suspicion flared in her eyes. "I'm not leaving them." "Kale is my beta," Rowan said patiently. "My brother in all but blood. He won't harm them, and he won't let anyone else near them. You have my word." Lena chewed her lip, clearly torn. Finally, she crouched beside Eli. "I need to speak with the king," she said softly. "His friend will stay with you and your sister, just for a little while. Can you be brave for me?" Eli looked at his mother with eyes far too old for his years. "Will you come back?" "Always," Lena promised, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "Always, my heart." The boy nodded, satisfied. Kale appeared in the doorway as if summoned, which, in a way, he had been. Rowan had asked him to wait nearby. The beta entered with careful, unthreatening movements, settling himself by the fire. He produced a small carved wolf from his pocket, one of several toys he kept for the pack's younger children. "I'm Kale," he said to Eli. "Want to see something?" Eli's eyes locked onto the carving with immediate interest, suspicion giving way to curiosity. Satisfied, Lena followed Rowan into the corridor. They walked in silence to the old guard room, a small stone chamber with a single high window and a bench built into the wall. Rowan gestured for her to enter first, then followed, leaving the door open, another gesture of trust. "Sit if you want," he offered. Lena remained standing, her back to the wall, arms still crossed defensively. "You want the full story?" she said. It wasn't a question. "I do," Rowan confirmed. "Start wherever you're comfortable, but I need to understand what I'm protecting you from, and what threats might follow you here." Lena was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. When she finally spoke, her voice was controlled, but edged with old pain. "I was born to Grey Hollow Pack," she began. "Small territory, north and east of here. We kept to ourselves mostly. My father was beta there. I grew up training as a warrior. It's what I was good at." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "I was fast, smart, good at reading terrain and enemy movements." "That's valuable," Rowan observed. "It was," she agreed. "Valuable enough that when Blood River's Alpha, Matthias, saw me at a gathering, he decided I'd make a useful mate." Her jaw tightened. Not a partner, a useful tool, someone who could give him strong airs and tactical advice. "But you agreed," Rowan said carefully. "I was 18, Lena said, bitterness seeping into her tone. "And stupid. He was charming when he wanted to be. Powerful. Everyone said it was a good match. Grey Hollow was small. Blood River was strong. The Alliance would protect my birth pack." She laughed without humor. "I thought I was doing something noble." "What happened?" "The mark happened," she said quietly. "The moment he put his teeth in my neck and claimed me, everything changed. He became controlling, possessive. Every decision I made had to go through him. Where I went, who I spoke to, how I trained. He said it was for my protection, for the good of the pack." Her hand drifted unconsciously to the scar on her neck. But it wasn't protection. It was ownership. Rowan's hands clenched at his sides, but he kept his expression neutral. And the children? Eli came first, Lena said, and for a while things were better. Matthias was pleased. A son, an heir. He ignored me more, which was a blessing. Then Mira came and... She trailed off, pain flickering across her face. And? Rowan prompted gently. He wanted another son, Lena said flatly. He was disappointed that Mira was female. Said she was only useful for alliances when she got older. Treated her like she was less. And I watched my daughter grow up knowing her father saw her as a commodity. Her voice hardened. I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't watch my son learn to be cruel like him. Couldn't watch my daughter learn to make herself small. So you left, Rowan said. So I left, she confirmed. I waited until he was away on a hunt. Took Eli and Mira, what supplies I could carry, and I ran. Cut his mark out myself the first night so he couldn't track me through the bond. She met Rowan's eyes squarely. It hurt worse than anything I've ever felt. But it was worth it. He came after you. Of course he did, Lena said. Sent trackers. I managed to lose them in the river, but I knew they'd keep looking. That's when I started moving toward Red Rock. She tilted her head. I'd heard stories, that you were fair, that you'd taken in rogues before, given them a chance. Some stories are true, Rowan said. Some aren't. What made you think yours would end well? I didn't think, Lena admitted. I just knew that dying free was better than living as Matthias's possession. For me and for them. She straightened. So now you know. Blood River's Alpha is missing his Luna and his heirs. He'll see it as theft, as insult. He'll come for us. And when he does, he won't come alone. Rowan absorbed this, his mind already working through implications. How many warriors does he have? 30, maybe 35 capable fighters, Lena answered. Not all of them loyal to him personally, but loyal to Blood River. They'll follow orders. Tactics? Aggressive, she said. Matthias prefers overwhelming force to subtlety. He'll try to intimidate first, show up with most of his wolves, make demands. If that doesn't work, he'll attack. Weaknesses? Lena hesitated, then said, pride. He can't stand being made to look foolish. If you can get under his skin, make him angry, he makes mistakes. Noted, Rowan said. He studied her carefully. You know I'm putting a target on Red Rock by protecting you. I know, she said quietly. That's why I'll leave if you ask me to. I won't let my children's survival cost others their lives. That's not what I said, Rowan corrected. I said I'm putting a target on Red Rock. I didn't say I regret it. Hope flickered in her eyes, quickly suppressed. Why would you risk your pack for us? Because you're right, Rowan said simply. Wolves should take care of their own. And you're a wolf who needs help. That's enough. Lena blinked rapidly, fighting back tears she clearly didn't want to shed in front of him. I don't know what to say. Say you'll help me protect this pack when Matthias comes, Rowan replied. Say you'll stand with us, not just hide behind us. She straightened, and for the first time since he'd met her, Rowan saw not just a desperate mother, but the warrior she'd once been. I'll fight, she said, for my children's future, for the wolves who give us sanctuary. I'll fight. Good, Rowan said. Then welcome to Red Rock, Lena, formally this time. He held out his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she took it. Her grip was firm despite her weakness, her palm calloused from hard work. One more thing, Rowan said, before releasing her hand. Eli, you said he's 6. Yes, Lena confirmed warily. If you stay, If you truly become Pack, he'll need to train with the other young wolves. Learn what it means to be Red Rock, not Blood River. Lena's expression softened. He'd like that, she said quietly. He's been asking about training, about being strong like I used to be. Then we'll start soon, Rowan said, when Mira's well enough that you don't need to watch her every moment. They walked back to the old kitchen together, the silence between them more comfortable now. When they entered, Eli was laughing, actually laughing, at something Cale had said. The carved wolf now joined by a small bear and a rabbit that the beta had apparently also produced from his pockets. Mira was awake, watching the impromptu puppet show with wide, delighted eyes. Cale looked up as they entered, reading Rowan's expression. He nodded slightly, understanding passing between them without words. Eli, Mira, Lena said, her voice warm. We're going to move to better rooms, in the main keep. Is that all right? Eli looked uncertain, but Mira clapped her hands. With the bears? She asked Cale hopefully. Cale grinned. I'll make sure the bears come visit, he promised. As they gathered the few possessions they had, Rowan watched this small, fragile family begin to relax, just slightly. They were still wary, still hurt. But they were also, for perhaps the first time in a long time, safe. And Rowan intended to keep them that way, whatever the cost.